And I do know what I'm forgetting now. As far as when he first made it into Gaza, that's when he made it there during the first month of the Islamic calendar, because you got like I think it was called Muharram. That's what it was called, and that was 1353. But after he left Tashala, that's when he made it into another place called Abu Layton, and it took him about 10 days to make it there. My first impression, I'm thinking like Abu Layton could be southwestern Algeria, which is right next to the Hogger Mountains. The Hogger Mountains would be southeastern Algeria. But, based on where he went to after he left Abu Layton, I'm thinking it probably was southeastern Mauritania. Maybe Walata. We'll see, because I stopped at a certain point. Like after Abu Layton, I had stopped. But I'm going to explain that after I get done talking about what happened when he went to Abu Layton. So when he made it into Abu Layton, he said for the most part, they had a heavy black African population there, and a lot of them were merchants, unlike that of Gaza. Those people there didn't go elsewhere to trade. They basically would just remain there, and then other people would come there to trade. But as far as Abu Layton, you had people coming there, and they would leave as well. They had a relationship with the Egyptians because all of the clothing that they had came, as far as the material, came from Egypt. You know what I mean? So they established a relationship with them as well. So, I'm thinking, I'm not going to go that far on that part. So anyway, when he got there, he said it was a black African population, but it was also an Islamic population as well because they had mosques that were built there too. And when they first landed, the merchants that was with him, they left their possessions under or in the hands for these people to watch, for some of the people that live there, some of the inhabitants. I hate when I do a spit. God damn. Anyway, so let me see. He felt a certain type of way after a while because I don't want to say, he witnessed bigotry, but Ibn-Batutta, his exact words that the Africans there in Abu Layton didn't like white people because you had a population of people there that Ibn-Batutta referred to as white. Now, I thought that was fucking interesting, so I broke that shit down in my head, and like I say, I documented all this already. So I broke it down in my head. I don't remember. I'm forgetting to eat my burgers. This shit's gonna get cold. Anyway, now before I get to them, I do want to highlight a compliment he gave to the people there, and this is why I don't think Ibn-Batutta was racist. Because what I'm about to explain next is going to be a little curious, but it's interesting to me, and I like it because I think it's true. But he did say, like, the women that lived there were beautiful. That's what he said. They were a black African population there, so it didn't really look like the Berbers that you'll see nowadays. And more than likely the Berbers that existed back in the day, including those that lived in Morocco and those that would look like Ibn Battuta also. Those that would look like Abu Bakr, you know what I'm saying? Those that would look like the heads of the Almohad Confederation or the Almoravid Confederation, etc. He said the women were beautiful. They were prideful. They were not shy. He said the men did not really harbor a jealous attitude. And even though that they were Islamic, they had like a different way that they will practice their culture that kind of made them somewhat distinguishable to other people that he witnessed. You know what I'm saying? Like, for instance, like, okay, the people would not gather, but like congregate and pray together, but the women did not fully veil themselves. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't have on I think it's called, I forget, it started with an H, but the dress that they wear, the women didn't wear that. They were kind of like half naked. And as a part of their customs, like, they had a degree of sexual freedom. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you were a male and you were married to a female, you can have like women friends, but at the same time, it's not just a concubine thing. You were allowed to have sex with them. And what makes it different than just having a concubine is the fact that it was also vice versa on the woman's part. So, like, if the woman was married to a man, she was also allowed to have sex with other males or men as well, and it was practiced freely, and it was a regular thing. Like he was saying, like, okay, say like uh, a guy came in his house. This is the example that he used. He said, like, if a guy walked into his house, and then he's seen his wife talking to somebody or being intimate with them, you know, he'll just sit somewhere and then wait till they get done. That's how open these people were, based on what Ibn-Batutta had witnessed. All right? Now, when he first felt some type of way or felt like, damn, you know, felt a little odd about it, there was a guy, he didn't give a name of him, but he said he was a Kaza. So he was like one of the chiefs, you could say. See, a Kazi is like a judge, is somebody that's a head of administration. So basically a chief. He's not a sultan, but it's, you know, in terms of like titles, that's the most important title that he had referenced. But he had built a relationship with that guy because he became familiar with his wife. So one day he had but he witnessed the Kazi talking to a young lady, as he put it, and he felt some type of way about it, so he was going to walk off. So the Kazi caught on to it, and then he had a conversation with him, letting him know how their culture was, that, you know, what he was doing was a part of the norms. And in the midst of, you know, him feeling a certain type of way about this, it's funny, the young lady, he said, like, she was kind of like smiling at him. So, you know, me thinking about it, I took it as like, you know, she was smiling at his innocence. You know, it's like, say, it's funny, I'm trying to think of a good-ass example. Like, you look at, it's kind of, like, okay, I guess, you know, this is probably not the best example, but as far as, like, somebody having what they call, like, when you go somewhere and you get culture shock or some shit. You know what I'm saying? He had a culture shock, and I'm thinking about that Bruce Lee movie, the Bruce Lee story about his life, and I'm thinking about the scene when he was in a movie theater, and, you know, they was playing a clip or whatever, and it was an Asian actor, and he was acting real silly, but based on Bruce Lee's interpretation of it and how he felt, he looked at it as being not just stereotypical, but that guy was kind of like embarrassing their race. You know what I'm saying? Like creating a stigma. Or you got the stupid little Asian male that acts goofy and bumps his head and kicks or bumps his shin or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? So everybody in the theater was laughing except him, and then his wife had caught on to it. Now, that might not be the best example, but as far as like how Ibn Battuta felt when he witnessed this amongst the generation, the general population, but especially as far as the Kazi is concerned, that's how he felt. So I feel like that's the reason why the young lady that the Kazi was talking to was smiling at him. That's why I say, like, she was basically smiling at his innocence, like he didn't know. You know what I'm saying? And Ibn Battuta said, like, the only place that he witnessed something somewhat similar to it was in India when he had made his journey there, because as far as his book, India was one of the places that he went to as well. He went to 3 different regions altogether. China, which is basically Northeast Asia, India, which I call Southeast Asia, but, you know, some people refer to it as the sub-Indian continent. So you got China, Northeast Asia, and you got India, sub-Indian continent, but really just Southeast Asia. Then he went to what he called Nigritia, which is the Sudan. So overall, that's Africa. But most people will understand it as the Sahara. You know what I'm saying? Well, anyway, that's the only place that he had witnessed something similar to that. So I thought that was cool. And I'm thinking, like, damn, the people, they really didn't have too much, and I'm still going to touch on the racial part. Like I say, all this documented. But I'm like, damn, they really didn't have what Eckhart Tolle would refer to as, even though, like, I got my own way of looking at this also, but as far as using his language, They didn't have too much of a collective ego. They did have like a degree of freedom. Like based on what Ibn Batutta witnessed, they were not like a materialistic group of people in that sense, especially in terms of sexual freedom. Like if you compare that approach to like how it is in America, I feel like if the average guy came home and not only his girlfriend, but caught his wife, you know what I mean, being intimate with somebody else, even if there was no penetration, you could feel that shit in the air. You know what would happen? You'll have an Eminem moment, you know what I'm saying, in that video, Guilty Conscience, at the end of it. That's exactly what the fuck would happen here in America, but not there. You know what I'm saying? And I'm wondering, like, okay, as far as like the whole of Africa is concerned, especially during medieval times, I'm like, was that kind of like a normality with different variations? Because if that's the case, then I can understand the theory of how the AIDS virus, or the HIV virus rather, was fucking created in the lab. And if that's true, then that means you had to have people there, Africa's a part of it, that know the cultural norms and helped out. And creating something that destroys the fucking immune system that is guaranteed to wipe out populations of people, especially if that's how their culture operated. As far as sexual freedom is concerned now, other people might look at it and say, damn, that shit is, backwards and barbaric, but it's like when you look at it, like philosophically speaking, I'm talking about like you take yourself out of your own mind frame, the shit that's been taught to you, you take yourself and you take that thinking and you broaden it in so many different ways of looking at it. That's the reason why you got terms like promiscuity, etc. Oh my God, there's so many ways to look at it. But anyway, I'm thinking like shit. If that was like a kind of ubiquitous, then yeah, I think the HIV virus was created and that shit was premeditated. But that's a whole nother story. But like I say, to me, the story in itself, I'm looking at it, and it's not an excuse on my part. I'm just looking at it like those people wasn't that materialistic in that sense. Now, they did have a collective ego, and I wouldn't say a collective ego. I'm going to call it something else in a second. The rule that they had was, okay, you can marry who you want to marry there, but the man, if they chose to become nomads or they wanted to go elsewhere, it was allowed, but the women were not. That was fucking crazy. It's like, okay, marry this woman, she cannot go outside of the settlement. The women overall in general could not leave Abu Layton. Now, I'm going to call that a form of Darwinism. And there's many other synonyms, but that's definitely a reflection of altruism as far as a group mentality is concerned, inarguable. And another aspect of their culture that Ibn Batutta talked about was when you bear a child, like say a woman bear a child, when she has a child gets named after her brother. That's how it operated. Now you had like different family units and stuff like that. So like whatever that gets passed down from the family onto a child gets passed down to the sister's child at the same time. So to make the example clear, let's take I'm trying to think of a pop star with a small family. Let me see. I'm just gonna take myself. Say, okay, me and I got a sister, right? Okay, my sister got to have a son, and her son gets named after me. Then I have a child with a woman, or she has my child, but the possessions of our family as far as the unit that I'm more intimately a part of or connected to, those possessions gets passed down to my nephew. That's how it operates. But I'm thinking like it makes sense in the long run because the woman that I'm with, that means the possessions of her family gets passed down to my son. You know what I'm saying? So you'll have to have some type of boy-girl ratio going on for a culture like that in the long run to not only make sense but to work. Now, I understand, like, you can't determine if you want to have a boy or a girl. That's why I feel like this whole collective society thing does make sense. You know, the whole saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I feel like they made a ratio work some type of way, shape, or form. And it's just like taking the number 11 and dividing, it's taking like 7 and 11 and dividing them. And you're going to have like it's going to be an infinite process if you try to divide 7 from 11. You're going to keep going on and on and on. You're going to carry, dot, carry, dot, carry, dot, carry, dot. It's going to be a repeat. That's how it's going to happen. So I'm taking that like mathematical formula and I'm going to apply it to those people. You know what I'm saying? Based on the testimony of Ibn-Batutta. So let me see what else. Okay, finally, the racial part of it. And like I say, I documented all of this on my Facebook. Okay, this is what I'm thinking. Start off, the Berber population. Now, it is a fact, all right? It is a fact, fucking based off DNA evidence, and I'm not going to say it all right now, that the early Badarians in Egypt, basically the Bedouins, right? Those people came from fucking Western Asia, all right? They had been in Egypt for 7,000 fucking years. This doesn't take away from the Aboriginal black population, by the way, because I got a very unique way of looking at this. But factually speaking, from a historical standpoint, Arabians had been in northern Africa for at least 7,000 fucking years. These are the people that became Berbers. Now, you also had later unfoldings or historical happenings that took place as well, such as the Romans and all of that, them building the city of Cartagena. So I think like you got a mixture of some European blood in these populations also, but as far as the root of it, these people essentially came from fucking Western Asia. Now, how do I know this? Okay, first off, the Berbers, when you look at them today, they're going to look like the people that lived there during the medieval times. Now, if you go online and you look at this compilation, right, of different rock shelters that were all a part of a fucking region called the Sealy and the Jer. They have paintings that go back, all right, at least 9,000 years, all right, that which predates Western Asians that made their way into North Africa, substantially speaking, by the way, to where you could trace the shit. If you look at these rock paintings, they date back from 7,000 BC to 2,000 BC, all right? You are not going to find any, because you got all types of images. You got people that's holding arrows, you got animals, you got giraffes, you got buffalo, you got fucking little, you know, so they, when you look at the background of some of these paintings, you know, you got people that's kind of like not necessarily celebrating, but they're dancing. They're like freely expressing themselves because this is the BC era. And then you got like little circle shapes into the ground. And, you know, some of the stuff that I read about these people, some people interpret that as being huts. But come on now, if it was a hut or some type of structure, they'll draw that shit. That was something different. But anyway, you out of all of these images that's shown from all of these different paintings, all right, between 7,000 BC and 2,000 BC, you see people that are a dark-skinned complexion. This is not being racial. This is being absolutely factual. You see those that are a dark-skinned complexion. You don't see nobody, and this is fucking North Africa, basically, because it's really, let me see, you got, it's northwestern Sudan, so that's kind of like Central Africa, but also southeastern, not southeastern, southeastern Libya, all right? And then you also got some rock shelter paintings in Algeria. When you look at all of these shits, you don't find no fucking population, no image on these rocks of anybody that's a white complexion or a whitish complexion. Not anyone that is a orange You know what I'm saying? A fucking maroon color complexion, you see all dark-skinned images of people. All right? Now, when you go to, like, Sumeria, and you look at the standard of Ur, you look at this little box object, they show people that's riding, I think it's horses on there or whatnot, but when you look at them shits, they don't look anything like the people to see the inner journey. They look more like the Middle Eastern population overall that live there today. All right? And this is only, what, 2700 BC. So that's about 5,000 years ago, basically. But as far as, like, these rock shelter paintings, all of them people look completely different from those images. In other words, ancients pretty much were accurate as far as expressing through art how the population that lived around them looked. So you didn't see, like, Western Asians, for the most part, in North Africa. They didn't make it there, substantially speaking, until starting about 7,000 years ago. Now, when Ibn-Batutta said that you had a white population there, he's not talking about merely European. He's talking about Berbers, people that are Berbers there. It's like this. The only other population that he came across that were, I ain't going to say somewhat different, but, like, let's take the Balearic Islands. You see, he mentioned a group of people in Africa that he came across that he referred to as heretics, but they were Ibizans. All right, they was from that island Ibiza that was conquered in 707. Now, logically thinking about it, as far as Andalusia, okay, Spain conquered in 711 AD. All right, they didn't gain their autonomy as far as like a caliphate that's not connected to that of the Middle East until 929 AD under Rahman III. Under Rahman III or some shit like that. I forget his name, no matter, but until Rahman III, this is 929 AD, because he ruled 8 years prior to that. He came into office in 921 AD. But overall, they didn't definitively defeat the Muslims and oust them from their land until 1492. And this is in Granada. So you got basically a little over 700 years. That means miscegenation occurred. You got a term that these people during the medieval period was referred to, which is mulatto. That's basically a person that's mixed with, I want to say, Aboriginal Spanish and Berber ancestry. Again, Berbers originally come from Western Asia. So if they, by the time you get to like the 14th century, when Ibn Battuta made his journey into Abu Layton, even if you got like a population that was from that island itself, this is still like 600 years from that point, from 707 and from 711. That means those people along that island is not going to look that much different from the mulattoes. So even if you had a population there, he's still going to consider them white. And being that he was a Berber himself, look at every image of Ibn Battuta on any book that was published about him, any image that was drawn about him, all right? He don't look fucking black. He looked just like the regular standard Berber image. So that means consciously speaking, not unconsciously, not just subconsciously, but consciously, he fits himself into that category. So that means when he said like the Abu Laytans didn't like the whites there, he's talking about the general Berber population that was there. Those that also look like people that came from Morocco that traded with the northern Malis, the people that lived in Tagaza. I honestly believe that makes that makes the most sense. I don't think he separated himself from the population that he referred to as white. And even though he originally wrote this shit using the Arabic language, all they did was take whatever term that they used to denote whiteness, as he put it, and then came up with an English synonym for it when the book was translated. centuries and centuries later. So that's my discovery. Like I said, I got this recorded already on one of my phones, and then I had to erase this earlier, the second recording that I did of it, because I was trying to make a little bit more room for my Malcolm X audio that I got off the internet today. I really didn't have to do this recording, but I guess I wanted to shit in people's faces who was snooping. And just like that guy that walked past, some female sent them, tried to throw me off, tried to make me nervous, scared to curve. Nah, it ain't that. But yeah, that's what I think about that. Shit, hell yeah. Ibn-Batutta puts himself into that category. And I think a lot of Middle Eastern people, especially back in the day, did the same thing. Like, it was a guy that I had came across who I was reading about, and he was one of Prophet Muhammad's scribes. And Muhammad had at least 3 scribes I know about. Abdallah ibn Rawaha, another guy named Zayd ibn Zabit, and then the lady that raised him, who was also a slave, but she was African as well. She was black. She was of Ethiopian descent. Her name was Ayman. Now, when I was reading about one of those scribes, I'm talking about Zayd ibn Zabit, Thabit. And I was reading about him, it took me to other people because I had to include his name into the jargon because I didn't know too much about him aside from him just being a scribe. But, in reading about him, that's when I found out, like, the Arabic name for Joshua, which is Yasha, and then other people. And there was a quote that's contributed to Muhammad to where he talked about how Jesus looked to him, but he wasn't making it personal. He was really mentioning another guy. I got it written down on my paper, but it's also saved on my Facebook because I thought it was interesting because this is like the fucking 7th century. So we're talking 1,300 years ago. So this is fucking significant. But he was just he was talking about another guy, and he said Isa, because that's what they call Jesus in their language. He said Isa looks like this guy. And I was like, what? So I went ahead and did my double check of this shit. And when I brought up the picture of the guy that he referenced to make a similarity or to give it like a visualization of how Jesus looked, it's interesting to me, but to other people, they might find it, a little hard to deal with. The image of this guy is exactly what the fuck Ibn-Batutta would refer to as white. All right? The guy had curly hair, as he called it, but his skin wasn't pale. But if you think about it, it was more, like they say reddish, but I'm looking at these images. Basically, think about, you could take the ruler of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, for instance. Look at how he looked. Think about somebody that has, like, that complexion. You know what I'm saying? With longer hair and a beard. In other words, other than an aboriginal African, other than somebody that lives within the Sahara Desert somewhere. You know what I'm saying? I thought that was interesting. But after he left Abu Layton, oh yeah, that's what he said about Abu Layton and whatnot. But then when he left Abu Layton, he had made it into Mali. But see, I stopped. It was another town that wasn't exactly Mali that he went to first, and then Mali. But I stopped there because I had read a little further beyond that. The only reason I stopped there is because I think like there's a I don't want to say flawed, but in other words, they took the Nile River and the Niger River, and they kind of merged them as the same thing in the book. And I have a hard time believing that Ibn-Batutta, like, I understand he was wrong as far as, like, where this town El Mahdiya was at, if it existed, and it connecting the Mediterranean to one of those rivers south of Marrakesh. But I have a hard time believing that he did this on purpose as far as, like, confusing the Niger River with the Nile River. And it's only because one of the towns that he mentioned is also in Central Africa. I think Ethiopia, but in fairly close to East Africa. So I'm like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. How will he confuse the Niger River with the Nile River, and it's like a complete jump. So I had paused there. I'm like, let me read some other literature first, get a little bit more background before I continue, because I could just sit here and try to dissect it and give my best guesstimations and then make corrections, but I'd rather read other literature first before I continue with this book. And I'm talking about Ibn-Batutta. So I got 3 major books altogether: The Origins of an Islamic State, Tarikh-Al-Suodan, and then Ibn-Batutta, or Travels of Ibn-Batutta. And I'm pretty much almost done with that book. So like I say, I read further, so I already kind of know a lot already, especially as far as like the Malians. But I like clarity. You know what I'm saying? That's what I like. So I want to get a little bit more clarity about stuff, and then I jump back. Just like the book that I'm reading right now. Like I said, I got to read probably up until, let's see, it was compiled from authors for the most part during the 8th century. But I'm still assuming they probably got stuff after that point in that book, because a portion of those documents are missing. But what they did find, was compiled and then translated or whatnot. So I'm thinking like, okay, the people that translated the book probably added some more notes or thoughts to it in the end. If not, then I'm just going to have to read up until, as far as that book, up until the 7th century, the 8th century, and then just go to something else, like maybe a couple of Britannicals or whatnot, even though I noticed like those Britannicals missing shit. But anyway, yeah, this is just a quick reiteration. I did not intend for this shit to be an hour, 2 minutes, but shit, when I talk, information gets fucking brought to the surface, a good deal of it, and that's it. So, June, what's today's date? I think it's June 20th. If not, it's June the 20th, June the 21st at the latest. You know what I'm saying? But June, yeah, I'm going to say, no, June the 21st, that's what I'm saying. 11:09 p.m. Again, June the 20th, June the 21st at the latest. Diary purposes.